Can I smell it?
First, please.
It's just like milk. This came in right from this bottle, and it's uncanny how it really smells like milk. Hello and welcome to North Star, the world's most interesting podcast about all things vegan and cruelty-free. In this series, we'll be having very interesting, deep conversations with experts, thought leaders, celebrities, athletes, and pioneers in the plant-based field. You do not want to miss any episode. In this episode, we have with us Bharath Bakaraju, the founder of Phyx44, who is revolutionizing the dairy industry with precision fermentation. Bharath, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. The pleasure is all mine.
Phyx44 is the future of food, the future of milk. This game-changing technology teaches microbes how to replicate the milk which comes from an animal, but without the animal.
Absolutely.
Genius.
Thank
Tell
you.
us more about it.
Precision fermentation as a technology actually has been around for more than 2 decades. But what it does is it teaches microorganisms to do what the cells inside a mammal already do. Think of a cow and the mammary glands within a cow. The cells actually go about making the components that go together and combine as milk. What is milk? Milk is very complex and simple at the same time. It's water, fats, sugar, and proteins.
Bharath, you make it sound as it is. It's like you made it in the lab.
Yeah.
You did.
So we did. As a matter of fact, we did. So yeah, like I was saying, it's a mix of all of these things, and proteins are one of the most important functional elements in what makes animal-based foods so special for humans, and more so for milk. So what goes on inside an animal's body is the genetic code that is there in these cells is being used by the animals to make the proteins that go into milk that we basically they offer it to their young, and we choose to take it and use it for ourselves. And what we decided to do was put a bit of a spin on it, and put a bit of a spin on it to use the same genetic information, but inside a microbial cell, to teach the microbe to do exactly what an animal would do. Like I said, if you take the page that pertains to the proteins for milk from the recipe book of the animal,
Yeah.
and put it inside the recipe book of the microbe,
Yeah.
the microbe would read that recipe book and make the recipe, which is milk. That is what we are doing.
Oh my God, incredible.
Yeah, it is quite incredible. But the interesting thing is that this technology is not new. This has been in existence for more than 2 decades.
Yes.
In fact, as consumers, we would have either interacted with or even consumed products as a result of this technology without ever knowing that they have been made using precision fermentation. If you've seen or known anybody who's ever used insulin is made this way.
Insulin is a use case of this same technology?
Absolutely. Insulin, again, is something that we as mammals make, and we use the genetic information that we use in our body to make insulin, and put that genetic information inside a microbe to teach it to make what we would make inside our body. And then that insulin is taken and injected by people who have a specific type of diabetes to help them cope with the disease.
Right.
If you've heard of an enzyme called rennet, which is what is used to make cheese, that is also made this way. If you've taken a vaccine, you very likely have ingested a component that has been made using precision fermentation. And if you've seen advertisements for washing powder like Surf Excel or Tide, you would have seen some molecules being shown as active ingredients on the video, which help remove dirt stains from clothes. They are called enzymes. They are also made using the exact same technology. So yeah, what I mean to say is that this technology has been in existence for quite some time, but it has never been used to create food and food ingredients for humans, which is what is the change that we are seeing across the world right now, from companies across the globe in the US and Israel, in UK, Europe, and now.
So we're looking at democratization of fermentation, precision fermentation for food this time.
Absolutely.
The new era of food.
New era of food, absolutely. And you would see a similar kind of trend, not just in dairy. You would see that in eggs, for example. So there's a company in the US which is using the exact same concept and application to create proteins that you find in egg. So you can. This company used to be called Clara Foods. It's now called Every Food Company. So they're making chickenless eggs, like we're trying to make cow-free milk and milk products.
So could you tell us a little bit about your journey as somebody who is a conscious consumer himself? Why veganism? Why sustainability?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. See, I turned vegan, I think, almost 9 years ago now.
You were in India at that time?
I was in India, and it was a very difficult time to turn vegan. I think right now is relatively easy. So yeah, the primary motivation was animal welfare and the knowledge of the impact on the environment, sustainability. So I would say when I turned vegan, the number one reason was animals, and number two was climate. Now I think both are equally important to me because over a period of like the last decade or so, the seriousness with which we need to be able to tackle the climate challenge that all of us are facing around the world right now has only compounded. And animal-based food systems have a tremendously high environment cost, which most of the consumers are completely oblivious to. And this is something that I wanted to do something about. India is a dairy-loving country. Apart from being a dairy-loving country, irrespective of which community you belong to, dairy is woven very deeply into our cultural fabric. And trying to replace dairy is very, very difficult in a place like India. Of course, some other places in Europe as well, but more so here because it is interwoven very closely with some from some faith aspects as well. And that is where I believe that it also brings additional responsibility, saying that if we want to talk about being sustainable, being climate conscious consumers, and thinking about animal welfare, we talk about loving cows, then there's no better way to love cows than to free them of the need to be exploited for the sake of us getting our food. And that's also part of the motivation of Five.
So can you tell us a little bit about Five and your inspiration, especially to create a dairy alternative with precision fermentation? It's quite less known, but you're bringing it to the forefront.
I felt compelled to do a lot more than just doing some personal changes. That's when I basically took a sabbatical from where I was working earlier to evaluate how is it that I can do more in terms of giving back and contributing to tackling the climate change problem. That's when I looked at a few domains. I looked at solar, I looked at EVs, batteries, and of course, cell-based food systems as well. And that's when I realized that the emission footprint of animal-based food systems globally is higher than all of transportation put together.
Okay, pause.
Yeah.
So are you trying to say this was very calculated?
It was indeed.
You actually took, you actually measured the impact of each sector you wanted to dive into and chose the one which had the highest.
Actually, I didn't have to do the calculation. So there's a organization called Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which is backed by Bill Gates, which does a lot of these studies, and they have by market as well as globally split the pie of greenhouse gas emissions into different sectors. So when you look at that, you realize that animal-based food systems have a much higher environment footprint, whether it is in terms of land use, water use, or greenhouse gas emissions, than all of transportation combined. But when you look at the entrepreneurial activity as well as the funding activity, you would not be wrong to think that if you solve EVs, if you solve solar power, you would fix or you would solve climate change. That is not true.
Climate myth. Hashtag climate myth.
Yeah, it is indeed. And I felt compelled to to pick up the food part of the challenge because three things came together for me. Number one is that there's a lot of it is possible to deliver big impact by doing something in the space because there isn't much happening in the space right now.
Right.
The second is because as a vegan myself for 9 years, I've struggled to find good quality alternatives. And I think having the right kind of alternatives is essential for us to be able to even persuade a significant population, a percentage of the population to move on to alternatives. And the third thing is that I do have a background in biochemistry, which I never used. And I saw this as a golden opportunity for me to put that background to good use. So that's how I kind of zeroed in on food systems. And then within that, dairy as a problem appealed to me a lot more because being from India, India is the largest producer and consumer of dairy. And I've been craving good quality dairy alternatives for many years now. And I thought that the dairy challenge is worth spending time in. So that's how I kind of zeroed in on precision fermentation dairy.
I would still say it's quite a bold move because you're creating a new category.
Yes, absolutely. And the good thing about creating a new category is that there are no set rules.
Yeah.
The bad thing about is that there is no rule book to follow. But what I see as fortunate in our case is that there are other companies and pioneers in this domain who we can kind of look up to and emulate some of the things that have been done before. So I wouldn't say that we're completely in the dark there. Having said that, it's not going to be easy because we are tackling multiple things here. We are tackling a science challenge of how to even make it. We are tackling a technology and scaling challenge as to if you're able to make it, we have to make enough of it and at the right cost that it makes sense for the end consumer. And then finally, the consumer education challenge. So whether the consumer is going to be receptive to it, how are their attitudes towards cell-derived and microbe-derived alternatives to food? How do we communicate it to them? How do we make sure that they're able to see it the way we want them to see it or see it for what it is and then make climate conscious and animal welfare conscious consumer choices.
And so let's not forget the regulatory challenges.
Absolutely, yes. The regulatory challenges around the world. The good news is that important regulators like FDA and SFA, the Singapore's agency, have taken a very progressive view of novel food and novel food ingredients, which are derived from cells, basically microbial cells and even mammalian cells for cell-based meat. So that way, there is good news on the horizon that regulators are taking a progressive and a kind view towards these. Having said that, FSSAI, although has started taking steps in that direction, there is no concrete established framework of approval for us to be able to produce this and market this to Indian consumers. But I think it's only a matter of time. Hopefully, with the right kind of tailwinds, we would be able to tackle that challenge as well. Of course, there are headwinds too. The big dairy, we expect big dairy companies to take a very aggressive approach towards companies like us. And we do expect that to kind of have some kind of an interplay with the regulator approval process as well. But I think if we keep our eyes on the prize and spend the right kind of time and effort, we should be able to get through to the end of the lines.
Can I smell it?
First, please.
Let's do this. It's just like milk. This is,
Well, I love the look on your face when you took a sniff.
yeah, it just smells like milk. It's
I'm glad
it can't be anything else. This came in right from this bottle and it's uncanny how it really smells like milk. You cannot miss it. It's impossible. Amazing.
Thank you.
But you say you're full stack. That means you're also replicating fats and proteins both.
Yes. So that I believe that is what differentiates us from a lot of other companies, not just in India, globally as well. Even with limited resources, to begin with, what we strongly believe is if you want to convince the consumer to switch,
Right.
your product has to be good.
Yeah.
And you cannot make a great product only with proteins. You need to have fats as well because fats are an extremely important component of dairy. Dairy fats also happen to be the most complex animal-based fat in the world. But we have to start somewhere and do a good job of it to be able to create a good product. So what we do is also leverage microorganisms
Right.
to create components of fat that are identical to what you get in milk from the animal. These fats or these fat components cannot be found anywhere in the plant world, no matter which plant-based, seed-based, nut-based oil you take. And the specific fatty acid components that we are making and are looking at making a lot more cannot be obtained from anything other than the animal. So that's where like the full stack aspect comes in. We believe that we have to put both of these building blocks in place to be able to create or craft a superior product, which helps us go further and be able to differentiate ourselves from the competition.
Right. I mean, that's amazing. If you are replicating the genome, then technically you're also replicating the nutritional aspects of the gene, right?
Yeah. See, what I would like to make sure that we understand here is that the entire genome is not necessary to make what we are making. There's only a small aspect of the genome which is necessary for us to make what we want.
Right.
And yes, you're right in the sense that when you use this information and teach the microbes to make what you want, the end product is identical at a molecular level to what you get from the animal. And there is no way for us, if I gave you these two products, imagine there's protein from isolated from the animal and the protein that we made using the microbe, and I would give them both to you for you to be able to distinguish and tell which is from which. You would not be able to do that. Not just you, a lot of any of the analytical methods that we use will not be able to do that. And because these are molecularly identical, the way you as a human would interact and the way we interact is through taste and through flavor and through digestion, right? So none of these would change. So your interaction as well as the nutritional value that you get from these products would not change. So you get the same nutritional value as you would get from the animal-based product.
By when do you think we can achieve price parity, with the dairy milk that is available in the market right now for your product?
Sure. See, industry estimates say that in about 5 years from now, let's say 2028, is when some of the best companies around the world would start achieving economics that will make it possible for them to compete directly with the animal-based product. However, that might not be true for all of the companies in this space around the world. But by the turn of the decade, which is by 2030, most certainly we will be at a place where the product made this way will directly be able to compete or maybe even outprice what you're getting from the animal.
Outprice.
Yes, because we should not forget the fact that apart from us trying to drive our costs down, there are also other forces that are driving the cost of traditional dairy up. And this is just dollar cost, by the way. We are not even looking at the environment or the carbon cost of producing dairy. So the dairy costs are expected to keep climbing. And the costs of dairy components produced using precision fermentation are expected to keep going down. By turn of the decade, we should be. I am fairly confident that we'll see a lot of companies around the world which have achieved price parity and maybe even beating the animal-based product.
So, Bharath, you vegan sustainability and climate action. And how important is this to Phyx's mission?
See, the 44 in Phyx44, actually, 44 is a molecular weight of carbon dioxide. Okay. And whatever we do in terms of climate action, the impact is measured in terms of kilograms or tons of carbon dioxide that is fixed. And that is why we named the company Phyx44, because we want to fix carbon dioxide and we want to capture the mission of the company in the name. So that, needless to say, sustainability is paramount. That is why we do what we do. Of course, like I said earlier too, sustainability and animal welfare are two equally important pillars for us to be able to look at this dairy alternatives as a problem. The reason why we believe that we will have a significant impact, or we would like to have a significant impact in our fight against climate change, is that dairy alternatives produced this way promise to cut down land use, water use, and greenhouse gas emissions by more than 90% when you compare it with the traditional dairy that you get from animals.
Right.
So yes, that's why we believe that the right way for us to be looking at this problem is not just from an animal welfare point of view, but also from a sustainability point of view. Yeah.
Bhai, can you tell us any timelines that you were looking at for commercializing this genius invention?
So we are, I think, by end of 2024, roughly a little less than 2 years from now, we expect to be producing at commercial scale, which will allow us to be able to supply our product to businesses that will use these ingredients to make products for end consumers.
To scale up and to achieve the vision that you have, what is the kind of government support that you're looking for?
Oh, I can ask for a lot of things, but yeah, three things come to my mind. Firstly, I think then there is a need for a very clear regulatory framework for application and approval of precision fermentation derived novel food ingredients. That's the first and foremost requirement. And this is evident when you look at countries that are doing it successfully, whether it is Singapore or the US. The second thing is we should capitalize on the biotech muscle that the country already has and provide support through policies, whether it is through special economic zones or tax holidays, tax rebates, etc. And the third, although mentioning it last, but an equally important point is, I think we should start looking at alt protein, in this case, precision fermentation derived alternatives to dairy, as not just from not just a food security lens, but also in terms of a important, significant lever in us being able to achieve the climate and emission goals that we as a country have signed up for. When you talk about India has signed up for cutting so many emissions by 2030 or 2035. So far, the industries that are prominently figuring in how we are going to achieve that target do not talk about alt protein. But alt protein has a significant potential for us to be able to get there, and government has to recognize it. And we don't have to look far. If you look at Singapore and if you look at even the Middle East, they're looking at cell-derived as well as precision fermentation-derived alternatives to animal-based food exactly from this lens. One is they don't have as much land as we do, whether it is Singapore or the Middle East. There's so much arable land, so to speak. And they also have a very high per capita emission or carbon footprint. And this is like one stone, two birds. They're able to solve their food security issues as well. They become more self-reliant because they don't need a lot of land to grow their food now anymore. They should be able to do it in a much smaller footprint of land.
How has Phyx44's technology been evolving over the years?
So the technology that we are calling as precision fermentation has the ability to create proteins and fats, especially if they're animal derived. It gives us an alternative way of producing them without using the animals. So what that means is by building a platform that enables us to create any target protein or fat that we want, we would then be in a position to leverage that platform to recreate alternatives to other animal-derived foods. To as an example, you can look at eggs as the prime example of how it can be directly extended to that. But not just that, you could look at other applications as well, like honey, like silk. And in fact, a big opportunity that I see on the horizon is to be able to extend this to materials, alt materials. So you should be able to create alternative materials, say like leather or silk, or even alternatives to some of the plastics that we use using precision fermentation.
Biochemistry of even plastics, silk, leather.
So silk and leather, very likely. Plastic, I wouldn't say exactly mimicry of plastic, but something that can function the way plastics do today, but are biodegradable. So that's the challenge, right? So I think precision, this field as such can evolve to a point where it can offer us a platform where we are able to create alternatives to animal-derived foods, but also extend it further to materials as well.
How sustainable is Phyx44's milk? in comparison to a dairy-based
Sure.
milk?
So actually, there's something called as life cycle assessment that needs to be done to be able to assert exactly what kind of impact or reduction of any of the resources that are consumed are there. But going by the industry studies, reports, and also some of the LCAs done by some players, we can be fairly confident in saying that we can reduce the amount of land that is required. Let's say if you have to make a glass of milk, the amount of land that is required to make a glass of milk, the amount of water that is required to make it, that goes into making a glass of milk, as well as the amount of CO2 emission equivalent that is required to make a glass of milk. All of these three would be able to reduce by at least 90%. So that's the potential of precision fermentation. If anything, the efficiency is only going to increase over a period of time, eventually to a point where all of these resources would be a fraction of what would be needed today to make a glass of milk.
This is grown in a lab. We are just emitting 90%. So in terms of scalability, when you look at it, and this is just like, are we looking at, because you also need space in a lab to grow, or you need some kind of land usage. So do you look at, like, say, vertical breeding?
So think of so picture this. So you would have seen microbreweries where beer is being made in the microbrewery, right?
Yeah.
What you see there is a steel tank.
Yeah.
In the steel tank, there is food for the microorganisms, the yeast. Okay.
Yeah.
The brewer's yeast is eating something. That something could be wheat or any other plant-based substrate, right? What we are doing is the exactly same, but a lot more sophisticated. So if you were to imagine what a scaled up process for precision fermentation derived dairy, how the factory would look like, imagine really, really huge steel containers like the ones that you see in microbreweries, having capacity of up to 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 3 lakh liters of holding capacity, in which the food for the microorganisms is being added, and the microorganisms themselves are being grown and added. The microorganisms are eating the food that is being given to them and making the product that they want and putting it into the liquid. And as if you were straining your tea using a strainer, we strain the microbes off and collect the tea at the bottom. In our case, whatever we collect at the bottom is what we desire and what we put into our milk, which is precision fermentation derived dairy identical proteins and fat components.
Well, thank you so much, Bharath, for joining us. It was truly a pleasure, a big inspiration, and you're truly making India proud. You're making all of us proud. So we wish you all the best in your journey ahead, and hope to have many more conversations with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure being here, talking to you about what we do, and thank you so much for your work as well. And I'm hopeful that we'll see a lot more to come from you as well in the future.
Thanks, Bharath.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. If you have questions about Phyx44's cutting-edge technology, please write them in the comment section below. Do share this video, subscribe to the channel for more conscious videos on sustainability, climate action, and featuring the future of food. Thanks for being here with us, Bharath.
Thank you so much. The pleasure was all mine.
We'll see you in another episode again soon. All right, let's go grab a picture for our North Star Wall of Fame.
Sure.